Good evening all and welcome. Tonight I have a chilling collection of paranormal stories for you to dive into. And if you'd like to support Mort, it would certainly mean a lot to me, and for a small amount every month you get a cool amount of extra content, your name at the end, a birthday shout out and much more. So feel free to check out the link to Patreon if you are so inclined. But for now it's time to get comfortable and let the phantoms take control. I was younger, probably around early high school, and a friend and I were messing around with a Ouija board one night. We'd heard all the typical horror stories, but we were mostly doing it out of boredom and curiosity. To make it legit, we decided to ask each other deep, personal questions, things we knew the other person wouldn't possibly know. That way, if the board gave us real answers, we'd know something strange was going on. At some point, I asked. Now for context, I've had my stepdad in my life since I was 4, and that's the only dad my friend ever knew about. As far as she was concerned, he was my only father, so when I asked the question, it wasn't something she could have guessed or faked. The planchette started slowly moving across the board. M-A-R. I rolled my eyes and stopped right there. That wasn't even remotely close to the name I'd been told growing up. I just shrugged it off, figured the board was either random or not working. Well, fast forward 2 years. I'm older, and through a series of conversations and eventual confrontations, I found out that my mum had been lying to me about my biological father the entire time. Turns out the man I thought was my dad wasn't. My real father? A man named Martin. Yeah, M-A-R. I didn't even connect the dots until months later, when my friend and I were talking about that Ouija board session, reminiscing about how creepy some of the responses had been. Then it hit me like a punch to the gut. We both looked at each other in silence, and I swear I got full-body goosebumps. The board told me before my own family did, and it's still one of the wildest, most surreal things that's ever happened to me. My aunt used to live in coal country, Pennsylvania. If you've ever heard of Centralia, you know what I mean. For over 50 years, an underground fire has been burning beneath the town, ripping through coal seams and leaving behind an eerie wasteland. Even in the winter, you can see steam hissing up from the cracked earth, like the land itself is breathing out something toxic. The fire tore through the underground caverns and even the town cemetery, and over time the population dwindled. What's left now were broken roads and abandoned homes, and just a handful of stubborn souls who refused to leave. The place is remarkably dangerous now, because of the very real possibility that your house might be swallowed up from underneath you, and you'll be sent to a literal inferno. But Centralia isn't the scariest part of this story. My aunt and her husband lived just a few towns over, in an old house built above a massive coal dig. Back in the day, miners tunneled everywhere beneath the land, and no one ever really knew if those tunnels passed under their homes. And sometimes, without warning, the ground would just give out. Yards would sink, basements would buckle. It would always be a gamble living in that area. The house my aunt bought had a history soaked in tragedy. The man who'd lived there before had lost his wife in a horrific accident. She fell down the steep basement stairs, straight to the cold, unforgiving floor, where they used to shovel coal into the furnace to heat the house. Not long after, the husband passed away in the exact same way. He fell to his death, lying broken and alone at the bottom of the stairs, and his body wasn't discovered for days. When my aunt and her husband moved in, they didn't know this, but it didn't take long for them to realize there was something wrong. The strangeness started small. They'd be outside hanging laundry on the line, when suddenly the radio would switch stations. My aunt liked listening to low-frequency stations, smooth jazz, soft rock. But the dial would jump to high frequencies blasting country music, which she really wasn't a fan of. It was as if someone was deliberately tuning the radio to annoy her. Then the noises began. At night after the sun went down, the house would come alive, creaking, groaning. It wasn't just the sound of an old house settling. Doors would slam shut by themselves, almost violently, when no one was near them. Footsteps would echo through the halls, but when they checked to see if there could be an intruder, there never was. It was the basement, though. That was the worst, the main offender. Every time they went down there, whether to store something or clean up, the activity would spike. The air felt heavier down there. My aunt said she always had the unnerving sensation of being watched, and the more they made changes to the house, the worse it seemed to get. One night, after weeks of escalating disturbances, my aunt finally snapped. She had reached her breaking point. She sat down with her husband, and they came up with an idea that was as desperate as it was strange. They decided to talk to the spirit. They went down into the basement, right to the bottom of those cursed stairs, and spoke out loud to the man who had died there. They begged and pleaded for peace. My aunt told him that they wouldn't make any more changes to the house for a few months if he would just leave them alone. She swears she felt the air shift after that. And for a while, things actually got better. For about 7 or 8 months, the house was quiet. There were no footsteps, no slamming doors, and the radio stayed on the station it was supposed to. But it was temporary. Years later, after they sold the house and moved away, the new owners had a different experience. The house collapsed. It caved in right around the area where the man had died at the bottom of those stairs. Some people blamed the old coal tunnels beneath the house, saying the ground had finally given out. But my aunt doesn't think it was the earth shifting. She thinks it was him. Maybe he finally took the house with him. Either way, the house is gone now. But sometimes when I think about it, I wonder, was it the weight of the coal mines that caused the collapse? Or the spirit of the man who couldn't bear to see his house changed? What do you think? The place I work is an old 3-story house in the downtown area of a city in Mississippi. I'm not sure when it was built, but it was added into over multiple occasions throughout the years. It was a private home, a restaurant, a law office, and maybe other businesses that I'm not aware of. And since 2014, it's been the main office for my job. In general, it's an old building that makes old buildings sound from time to time. For a long time, I was often the first person here and among the last to leave, and have heard what sounded distinctly like voices upstairs when I knew for a fact no one else was there, and others have reported similar sounds. One evening in September of 2015, Toys R Us held a Force Friday event for the release of new toys and merch for Star Wars The Force Awakens. 2 workers, David and Ronnie, decided to meet at the office after work and ride together to the event. I forget exactly what time the event started, but it was late enough that we all went our separate ways and ate dinner before meeting back at the office. I was the first to arrive back at the office. I pulled up and parked in the front lot, and noticed Ronnie, who lived close enough at the time that he walked to and from the office rather than driving, so the lack of his vehicle there wasn't unusual, was walking up the front steps, and I assumed he went to the office. I did notice that he was wearing different clothes that he'd worn that day, but didn't think much of it. I got out of my car and headed in to wait with him until David and his wife arrived. When I got to the door, though, it was locked. I thought Ronnie had just locked it behind him as a joke. I didn't have a key to the front door, so I knocked, but Ronnie never appeared. I decided to return to my car, and when I did, I looked and saw Ronnie walking up the sidewalk from his apartment, wearing the clothes he'd been wearing at work that day. I decided not to say anything, but I guess I was noticeably uneasy because he asked me what was up. As I was explaining what I saw, David and his wife arrived, so I told them too. We did a search of the area. Our office is fenced around two sides, so we split up thinking that maybe someone had gone around the building. They wouldn't have gone anywhere if we had headed them off from both sides, and we did, and we met in the back, none of us having seen anyone. We kind of shrugged it off, or they did since they hadn't seen anything themselves. But it still bothered me. Months later, the event wasn't fresh in my mind at all anymore, and I got to work early on a Monday morning. I did my usual round of turning on the lights, unlocking the front door from the inside before heading back to make coffee. I noticed Ronnie was standing over by the copier facing away from me, assuming he must have come in while I was going around turning on the lights, because I had shut off the security system when I entered, so no one had beaten me there. I said, "Morning," and continued walking to the kitchen. He didn't reply, so I assumed he hadn't heard me. Later that day, not having really thought about it again, I asked Ronnie's wife, who also works with us, where he was because I needed his input on a project. She told me that he was home sick. I asked what was wrong because he seemed fine this morning. She said he hadn't been there at all, and that he'd been sick all weekend. Another year or two later, a similar incident happened. I got to work early, and after I had made coffee, I saw Ronnie walking up the steps to the second floor. But then a few minutes later, he and his wife arrived to work, and he was wearing entirely different clothes. I had told a few people at work about the incident, but they all just considered it a good spooky story to share around Halloween time. Until earlier this year. Until then, I was the only one who had seen the thing we dubbed as the other Ronnie, or at least the only one to share a story of it. But then one day our project manager, Wade, saw it. He isn't exactly a no-nonsense kind of guy, but he isn't the type of person who would just start to make stuff up. He had left something upstairs when he left to go home, so he came back. When he got to the office, it was after everyone had gone and locked up. He went to grab whatever it was he had left and noticed Ronnie was sitting at the desk upstairs facing a computer. "Hey," he said, but never got a reply, then went to the restroom. When he came back out, he noticed Ronnie was gone, though the door had never made the ding sound it makes when it opens. I haven't seen the other Ronnie since then, but I do occasionally think about it and keep an eye open for it. A few things to note. Other Ronnie is always wearing jeans, which Ronnie often but not always wears. It's always been facing away. Neither Wade or I saw the face, but it just overall looks like the same build and size. It never speaks or seems to really do anything. The only time there's ever been any motion from the other Ronnie was when I saw him walk up the front steps that first time. I'm curious if anyone has any idea what this could be, or if you've experienced anything similar. After my father passed away, something happened that my mother still doesn't like to talk about. It was an ordinary afternoon. She was walking through the living room, the sunlight spilling in through the window like it always did. And there he was, sitting on the couch, legs crossed, calm as ever. He was wearing one of his favorite shirts, the kind he used to wear before he got sick. He looked whole and healthy, like himself again. He met her eyes, gave her this little smile, half amused, half tender. The way he used to, when he knew something you didn't. He wasn't a mist, or a shadow, or some shimmering outline. He wasn't see-through, and he wasn't glowing. He looked completely solid, like in life. But my mother was terrified of ghosts, always has been. So instead of comfort, all she felt was panic. She blurted out, "What are you doing here? You don't belong here." She turned away for a split second, and when she looked back, he was gone. Couch empty, like he'd never been there. Years went by. That afternoon became something we only talked about in hushed whispers, if at all. Until one night it happened to me. I'd fallen asleep in the recliner in the living room. I stirred a little because I had to use the restroom, but I didn't get up. That's when I felt it. Someone climbed on top of me, gently, and rested their head on my shoulder. It wasn't scary. It wasn't even surprising. It felt familiar. Without thinking, I wrapped my arms around them and hugged back. I could feel the shape of a man's back, the fabric of an undershirt beneath my hands, the weight, the warmth, the scent. Every part of me told me exactly who it was. It was my dad. That hug felt exactly the same way it used to when he was alive. In those final years, all he wore were undershirts and pajama pants. And in that moment, there was no question that it was him. And then I fully woke up. The recliner was empty though. But that feeling stayed deep within me, and I carried it for days. Not with fear, but with peace. I don't expect anyone to believe me, but I know what I felt, and I know what my mum saw. And I truly believe there is something after this life. My first spook was sometime in my high chair era. My high chair looked down the hallway on my grandparents' trailer, where my parents lived at the time. I remember crying for my older sister, who was only 4 years older, so maybe 5 or 6 at the time, because she would smile as she fed me. My mom always had a tension that made me feel scared, but of course it was from my addict dad. I remember eating applesauce, specifically with bananas, because once I tasted the banana, I looked up in excitement and saw this thing. I guess people call it the Hat Man, but from what was buried in my mind, it was more of a demon. The trailer roof was only 7 to 8 feet high, and this figure touched the top, with eyes that were easily around 6 feet 8 inches. My dad was 6'4", and the red slits would have been looking down at him. Its hat looked like one of those old fisherman hats that people wear as bucket hats now, but more stiff. It had a brim that, now, bear with me, had smoke like mist coming off it. Its whole body was pitch dark. Around it, it looked as though the smoke rolled off it, billowing and lifting its body in flames of black. That's the only way I can describe it today. It still freaks me out. It did wave at me before going out the front door, so I guess Hat Man ain't all that bad. My second story, though, is when I had to take out the trash one night when I was older. My dad was kicked out in the height of his addiction, and my mum was a few years into her new relationship with my narcissistic stepdad of too long. We moved houses to one that wasn't remote, but you could go outside in your underwear and bra at night without anyone seeing you if the porch light was off. We had hills of dirt about 1/4 of a mile from our house, where some kids would ride dirt bikes, roughly 15 of them, in varying sizes and shapes. My stepdad decided he was angry at me for choosing to spend time with my biological dad once he started coming back into our lives, and knew that I was terrified of the dark. He made me grab 3 full bags of trash and go out in the low 40s, high 30s, barefoot. I was only 8, wearing a dress to walk the 1/4 of the mile over dirt and rocks. After getting halfway, the 3 horses went crazy and then dead silent. I had 2 purebred bloodhounds who then growled in a way I'd never heard any animal in life, online, TV, or anywhere else growl. It was so deep and curdling, like they were ready to die fighting. I froze. My feet were hurting. I couldn't even feel the pins and needles of the wind anymore. Out from the ruts of the mound of dirt, I heard this clawing. The dirt wasn't hard enough to sound like cement was being scratched, and whatever it was sounded too fast to not show up with the way it sounded. Almost like a spider with metal legs running on steel. But there was nothing to match that description in the surroundings. Nowhere for it to logically make sense for the noise to come from. And in my panic, I dropped the bags and ran, only to get kicked out for the night. Sleeping on top of the bales of hay, I couldn't see anything from the moonlight, but the sound of the dogs growling and that god-awful scratching still haunt me. There's a town called Lern in Northern Ireland. Very old sea town. It even has Viking names. There are buildings in the town over hundreds of years old and about 20,000 inhabitants. One long main street with all the shops on it. Near the top end has a jewelry store called Pollock's. It's a tiny shop, maybe 4 meters wide front. And when you walk in, there's literally a few meters to stand in, and you're surrounded by waist-high cabinets in front and to both sides. When I was 17, a girl dated me and said, "Do you know the place is haunted?" No details other than she heard that they had weird experiences there. Fast forward 3 or 4 years and I was working in a menswear shop on the main street, and a lady came in, and my boss mentioned she was from Pollock's. I took the opportunity of asking her over a cup of tea. "Hey, do you mind if I ask? I heard something about a ghost in the shop. Is it true?" She proceeds to tell me in the calmest, matter-of-fact tone, like it was nothing, that they had a full-blown poltergeist experience for years. It manifested itself as a constant feeling of being watched, knocked on the walls and from under the floor by unseen hands, by moving items all the time. In the storeroom, it would throw boxes at her son, it would poke him, blow in his ear, and gradually get worse by having bites appear on him, scratches with no feeling of it happening. One event was when he had spent some time setting up a display of cigarette lighters, walked out, and when he came back in, all the lighters were scattered everywhere, as if someone had just swung their arm across the cabinet and thrown everything to the ground. The owner also told me that they often would work for people's rings or necklaces or watches, and there'd be times that these items would simply disappear from locked storage. They would search, and after a few months, they'd reappear in impossible places. One time found under nailed floorboards that had never been moved in decades. This was the entity's favorite game. She said that they had learnt to live with this entity, but it started to get worse to the point her son didn't feel safe there anymore. They decided to bring in a priest in order to perform an exorcism on the place. She said they all had to hold hands while he spoke to the entity, and she opened her eyes when she heard him speak with a demonic voice screaming and growling. She said his face was completely distorted and changed in front of her. In the end, the events died down, but I'm not sure they ever fully left. The shop is now permanently closed. I never saw the owner again, but I believed every word she said. She talked so casually and matter-of-fact, it was almost like she was telling me what she ate for dinner. Since then, I've been fascinated by poltergeist stories. Is it energy we don't understand? Is it a person on a plane we don't understand? I guess I don't know, but I'd love to find out one day. In November of 2019, I went with 3 friends, 2 of them brothers, to their old country house just outside of Ibarra, Ecuador. The place had an eerie charm. To get there, you had to cross this rusted old bridge built sometime in the 80s. One of the brothers casually mentioned that the area under the bridge was notorious. Locals said people did rituals down there, sacrifices, chickens, cats, sometimes even people. The other brother added that Ibarra was known, unofficially at least, as the city with the most satanic and witchcraft-related activity in Ecuador. I've never been able to confirm that, but it stuck with me. As we unloaded our stuff into the house, my other friend, the joker of the group, laughed and said, "If there's any evil here, let itself show." nothing happened. At least not right away. Later that night, 3 of us, me, one of the brothers, and the same friend who made the joke, were hanging out in this long, narrow room that used to be a garage. It had 3 metal bunk beds, a tiny table, and this massive old wooden wardrobe pushed up against the far wall. I mean, it looked like it belonged in a different century. It was ornate, heavy, and ancient. We were standing by the doorway, maybe 20 feet from it, passing a joint and sipping beer, while the other brother was off in the kitchen grabbing more drinks. When it was my turn to take a hit, I heard something. A distinct wooden squeak, like an old bed or a door hinge, but drawn out, as if something was shifting its weight slowly across the old floorboards. It went on for a few seconds, too long to be nothing. I paused, joint in hand, and turned towards the sound. And that's when my blood went cold. The wardrobe was moving and rocking, shaking violently like there was something inside it, attempting to liberate itself from its wooden exterior. I just stood there stunned. My brain was having trouble processing. I even glanced at my joint in my hand like, what the hell is this thing? Then I looked at my friend next to me, his eyes wide, fixed on the same spot. He looked at us and said, "You guys don't even know what I just tripped." And then the other one, dead serious, said, "Did that thing just move?" We all saw it, all 3 of us. The thing shook so hard it had shifted a few inches away from the wall. A moment later, the other brother walked in with the beers and stopped. "Why do you guys look like you've seen a ghost?" We told him and he laughed. Thought we were messing with him, but we insisted. So together we walked up to the wardrobe. It was solid wood and heavy as hell. It was the kind of furniture that takes 2 people to even move. But it definitely had moved. We could see the outline of the floor from how long it had been there, and it clearly wasn't there anymore. We pushed it back against the wall and cautiously opened the doors, ready to liberate whatever demonic entity was hiding within its chambers. But there was nothing, just some old rolled up blankets. And none of us could sleep that night, not really. The house was quiet. I guess we all expected something to come out, and the fact there wasn't anything in there made it even worse. To this day, none of us can explain what we saw, what shook the wardrobe, and why it happened right after someone invited something to show itself. All that I know is that whatever it was heard us and chose to call our bluff. About 4 years ago, I moved onto my aunt's farm in southwest Saskatchewan, living in an old house on their property. At first, I loved the place, but it wasn't long before I started feeling uneasy while being there alone. It felt like something was watching me through the windows at night, and I always dreaded taking my puppy outside in the dark. Coyotes frequently surrounded the farm, and while our farm dog mostly kept them all at bay, sometimes they got too close for my comfort. It was a rainy day, and my puppy needed to go to the potty. The cows in the nearby pasture were unusually loud, and I heard a strange whistling noise but brushed it off as an owl. As I grew more frustrated with my puppy, something strange happened. From behind me, I heard a deep, raspy voice say, "Go." I froze. It repeated again, "Go, go," like it was being spoken through an old radio. I spun around, but there wasn't anything there. As I picked up my puppy and hurried back inside, the voice spoke once more, "Go." I spent the rest of the night locked inside with the lights and TV on to drown out whatever might have been outside. The next morning, my uncle found 2 dead calves in the pasture, though nothing else unusual was reported. Months later, I moved off their farm and moved out the province, trying to leave the eerie events behind me. However, A few strange things started happening again after I moved 2 provinces over to interior British Columbia. A month ago, in the dead of winter, I took my dog outside in our backyard, which is situated near a highway and walking path. It was dark, and my dog, who normally loves being outside, suddenly refused to step through the door. I coaxed her out, but she was acting odd, tiptoeing across the yard and staring towards the garage. Then, without warning, she bolted back towards the house and dragged me inside. I looked towards the garage but didn't see anything, but had this uneasy feeling creep over me. And that's when I heard it again. A familiar short whistle, the same sound I had heard back in Saskatchewan. We raced back inside, locking the doors behind us. The next day, my boyfriend told me our tenant had found a hunk of meat left outside his door. Given recent reports of someone poisoning dogs in the area, we became even more cautious. Oddly, both my boyfriend and I started having eerily similar nightmares, often about life or death situations, and we'd wake up stressed and drained. With everything that's been happening, especially how it's affecting my dog, I can't help but feel like something is following me. And I wonder what's really going on. This happened to my brother and I a few summers ago. There's an old barn near our house that's huge and weather-worn. It's attached to an abandoned farmhouse that's older still. It's said that both the owners died there decades ago, and while it's never been officially confirmed, everyone around here says they're buried out back of the property. The place definitely has a reputation for being spooky, and we had permission to go there because our parents are close with the original owner's grandkids. So one evening just after sunset, my brother and I decided to check out the barn. He was hoping to catch a glimpse of the barn swallows that nested up in the rafters. We'd heard you could sometimes see them sleeping all tucked and perfectly still. Creepy to some, but honestly they're kind of cute. Now, to understand the weirdness of what happened, you need to know how the barn is laid out. It had 2 doors, one in the front, one in the back. But only the front door actually opens. The back one is rusted shut. And, annoyingly, the light switch is next to the broken door, way on the opposite end from where you enter. So any time we went in after dark, we'd have to walk through the pitch-black barn to get to the lights. We went in with nothing but the dim glow from the setting sun behind us. We made it to the switch, flipped the lights on, and hung around for a bit talking, looking at the baby birds, just killing time. Eventually, we got bored. I handed my phone to my brother so he could use the flashlight in order to see, and to turn the lights off, and walk back safely through the dark barn. I stayed by the front door holding it open waiting for him. That's when he suddenly called out, his voice tense. "Sam?" "Yeah?" "Just checking if you're still there." He sounded off. I could hear shaky in his voice, like he was trying to sound casual but not pulling it off. A few moments later, he was walking fast through the barn towards me. Maybe he'd gotten spooked by something. We didn't talk about it right then. We just shut the door behind us and started the short walk home. It wasn't until we'd gotten a few blocks away, far enough that the barn was out of sight, that he stopped walking and turned to me. "Okay, now we're away from the barn. Can I tell you what I saw?" And I'll never forget how serious he looked. He wasn't joking, and he wasn't trying to scare me. He looked pale, and his voice had this strange edge to it, like he was trying to keep it together. He told me that as he was sweeping the flashlight around, just after turning off the barn lights, he caught something in the beam. Something tall, at least 7 foot, standing just a few feet away from him, still as a statue. Its skin looked dead. Its face had eyes but no mouth, just a blank space where it should have been, and the eyes locked onto him. Instinctively, he whipped the light back around, thinking maybe it was me trying to scare him, but there was nothing there. That's when he called my name just to check that I was still by the front door, and I was. He never told me this part until later. but said that even though the barn was empty when he looked again, he still felt like whatever it was still there. And here's the weird part. I sort of felt it. While I was standing there alone at the front door before he called out, I remember getting this strange feeling in my chest, like I was lightheaded or hollowed out. Not scared exactly, but like something was pressing against me. Neither of us saw or heard anything after that. And I'll never forget the look on his face when he told me about what he saw. At the time, we were living in the deep woods in Alabama. It was a quiet, rural area. When out of nowhere, the peace was disrupted. Massive dirt trucks started coming in and out of the woods at all hours, day and night. They were hauling dirt from somewhere back behind our property, so naturally we were curious. After a while, we started taking long walks to see what was going on, and eventually we found the source. They dug up something, a large hole that looked like the entrance to a cave. It didn't look like a job site or construction project. There were no signs posted, no crew standing around, just trucks and this strange wide opening in the earth. We never saw anyone actually working down it. That's when the weird stuff started happening. First, it was symbols. Strange markings would appear in the dirt near our home. They weren't random. There was something deliberate about them. Geometric shapes, spirals, lines intersecting in patterns we didn't recognize. We hadn't seen anyone near the property to explain how it got there. Then our kids began refusing to play outside. They kept saying they saw dark things with green eyes in the woods. At first, we thought they were just spooked by shadows or maybe telling stories, but their fear wasn't unfounded. They wouldn't even go near the edge of the yard, especially after dusk. Our dogs, who were usually full of energy, began acting strange too. They didn't want to go outside anymore. Sometimes they would bark or growl at nothing, just stare out the window or towards the woods and tremble. That was new for them. Whatever it was had unsettled them completely. At night, we began hearing things, sounds under the house, thumping, scraping like something heavy tumbling around beneath us. One night we finally decided to check it out. We took flashlights and crawled under the house, and that's when I saw it. The best way I can describe it? A tree person. That's what it looked like. Tall, long limbs, bark-like skin. It moved like a person. But there was something unnatural in the way it stood. It wasn't a shadow and it wasn't an animal either. And then it began throwing rocks and I scrambled out as fast as I could. But the strangest moment came a few nights later. I was outside near the edge of the property when I heard my husband calling for me from across the street, in the tree line. "Come here," he said first calmly. I didn't question it, I recognized his voice, and I began walking towards the trees. It was almost completely dark then, and I was just about to step into the shadowed brush when I heard something shout behind me. It was my husband, yelling from the porch. Where are you going? What are you doing?" I turned back. He was right there. There was no way he could have crossed the road, circled back and beaten me home. I then realized whatever was calling me from the trees wasn't him. I didn't look back, I just ran. Other strange things continued to happen over the next few weeks. Lights flickering for no reason, objects moving, more noises at night. But none of it was ever consistent, just this steady unease, like we were being watched. Then, after nearly 3 months, the trucks returned. But this time they weren't hauling anything out. They were filling the cave back in. They dumped loads of dirt into that hole, and then they left. They were simply gone. And to this day I don't know what that cave was or what they were doing, whatever they awoke. But it affected our entire household. And we, and the land, haven't been the same since. This happened when I was around 5. I don't know what it was at the time, just that it scared me to the point I couldn't sleep. It was a Halloween brochure, the kind that you'll see in any rest stop or welcome centers around October. This specific one had a flaming pumpkin on the front, and I spotted it at the Lancaster Welcome Center. Something about it, I don't know, spooked me. I remember staring at it like it was staring back, and that night I didn't sleep at all. Years passed and I forgot about it, until it returned into my life. I was a teenager when I picked up another one of those brochures at a fast food place. It was the same fiery pumpkin. I took it home and tucked it in my backpack and didn't think twice. But it was after I'd picked up that brochure that things got strange. When I'd be home alone after sunset, my dog, who was usually calm and friendly, would go stiff. His ears would perk up and then he'd growl low and rumbling. Then the barking would start, sharp and panicked, aimed directly at the window or the front door. I figured he was reacting to the neighbor coming home or a distant garage door opener. But then the feeling would hit me, pure dread, like there was something outside. I'd check the window, porch was empty, driveway too, but the fear was real. I tried speaking out loud once. "You're not welcome here. Leave." And for a while it would, but it would always come back next time I was alone. Eventually I started getting paranoid. I couldn't even take the dog out for a walk without feeling like something was watching us. And then, the shadows started showing up. Small hunched things like children darting between trees and telephone poles when I'd walk my dog at night. I'd catch a glimpse of them out of the corner of my eye, and I'd bolt home heart hammering. I found the brochure, tore it up, shredded it into 100 pieces, and once I had disposed of it, everything stopped. Here's where it gets weird. I wasn't even sure if it was the Jason's Wood brochure. I'd also had a Field of Screams one in my room around the same time, so just to be safe, I destroyed them both. The next fall, I picked up a Field of Screams flyers again and nothing happened. No dread, no barking, no shadow children. Maybe it was all just in my imagination, or maybe stress. Until I brought home another Jason's Wood brochure. That night, the exact same sequence started all over again. My dog barking like he was seeing something I couldn't. The waves of oppressive fear rolling in the moment the sun dipped below the trees. And the dark figures returned. I didn't wait. I shredded it immediately, and it never came back. I haven't touched one since. That's some killer marketing for however they managed to pull that off, because it seriously scared the crap out of me, but no way I'd want to go there now. Has anyone else had this happen to them? Because I swear, there is something wrong with those Jason's Wood brochures. I'm Muslim, and as part of my faith, I believe in the existence of jinn. You might have heard of them. They're mystical beings made out of a smokeless fire. They are like the demons or ghosts spoken of in other folklore, but ours are slightly different. Some are benevolent, while others malevolent. They live on a plane beyond our perception, unseen by human eyes, most of the time anyway. Sometimes they can appear in our world, taking on the shape of animals or humans or whatever form they wish. The evil jinn feed off fear and filth, and thus are attracted to places with negative energy and can even attach themselves to people or animals. But when they do materialize into our dimension, they can't do it perfectly. Every time a jinn takes on the form of another creature, something's always amiss. Maybe a foot twisted backwards, a hand with an extra finger, a face that looks quite familiar but not quite right. Almost like old-style AI art. There's always flaws, something that doesn't belong and look alien. I never thought I'd experience it myself until I finally did. And let me tell you, what happened to me that night wasn't just wrong, it was unnatural. It was late, a typical night, and I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone trying to fall asleep. My room is on the first floor of a 3-story house facing the front yard. The night was quiet, and I wasn't thinking much, just trying to drift off to sleep, and then I heard it. A cat, I presume, yowling. At first, I didn't think anything of it. It's a sound I've heard before, stray cats fighting or mating, or just being their usual noisy selves, but something about this was different. The yowling wasn't just a cat in heat. The sound echoed through the night, tearing into the stillness. It was desperate, and seemed to be coming from right outside my window. I was irritated, so I got up and went to the window to see what was going on. I was already too tired to deal with it, but curiosity got the better of me, and I peeked outside. But I didn't see anything. The street was empty, bathed in the dim light of the street lamps. There was no cat. The sound had gone. Confused, I returned to bed, trying to shake off the weird, uneasy feeling I got. The house was still, and my mind was too tired to think about it. So I grabbed my phone again and tried to focus on the screen. But then, the sound came again, louder this time and closer. That same mind-numbing yowling. My patience was wearing thin at this point. I groaned and got up, making my way back to the window. I was already tired and frustrated, and was not in the mood for whatever animal nonsense this was. But when I looked outside again, there was nothing. The yard was empty, the street lamps casting long shadows, distorting the shape of the street lamp making it. That's when I saw a slender figure. It looked a little off-putting, but there was no cat to be seen. This time I stayed by the window a little longer, scanning the shadows, waiting for the sound to return, eager to find the source of the intruding noise so that I could be at ease. But nothing. I was starting to feel unsettled. The sound, though absent, seemed to hang in the air, ringing in my ears. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, but I forced myself to shrug it off. I turned off my phone, lay back down and closed my eyes, hoping sleep would overtake me. And just when I thought I could finally rest, I heard it again, louder and more urgent this time, that same wretched yowling. But this time it sounded different, almost as if a person were trying their best to imitate the sound of the yowling. And to add to my growing fear, it sounded now as if it were right inside my room. I bolted up, heart racing, my mind scrambling to make sense of it. How could whatever it was be in my room? There was no way. But it was there, faint and unmistakable. The sound was all around me, encompassing itself around the darkness of my room. I raced to the edge of my room, hands shaking as I flicked on the light. The moment the light flooded my room, the sound stopped. It went dead silent. The sound of the night breeze and crickets chirping in the distance all seemed to suddenly come to a halt, as if an apex predator made its presence known. The sudden silence felt wrong, and my pulse hammered in my ears. I stood frozen, staring into the empty room. Nothing, no cat, no anything. I began to wonder if I was losing my mind. I left the light on. I didn't want to be in the dark again. Mortified. I stood there staring at the corners of my room while staring outside my window. The only sound I could hear was my heart pounding. Every second felt like it stretched into eternity. The air was thick with this feeling of unease looming over me, as though something were watching me. 20 minutes passed, then 30, then 40, but nothing happened. I began to convince myself it had been nothing, just a trick of the mind since it was so late. I turned off the light and sank back into bed, feeling exhaustion take over me. I closed my eyes, willing myself to sleep. As I finally managed to fall asleep, I relaxed and eased down, but it was short-lived. I found myself in a dream, a nightmare that felt like a memory I had twisted and its details altered. I was running down a street, my street, but it was wrong. Everything was warped and distorted. The trees bent at odd angles, the shadows stretched too long, and the sky looked quite odd. Behind me, something was chasing me. I could feel it, the weight of it, the pure anger and hatred emanating from whatever it was. But I couldn't bring myself to look back, to give in to my fear. I couldn't shake it anymore, so I glanced over my shoulder, and there it was. An entity huge, darker than anything I'd ever seen. Its form shifted. Like shadows dancing in the night, it was impossibly large, towering above me, its eyes glowing a dark yellow, and I felt a cold rush of dread wash over me as it moved closer. Its footfall was shaking the ground beneath me. I turned and ran faster, but it was getting closer. I felt its breath on the back of my neck. It chuckled its laughter, low, guttural, and echoing in the air. And then it was right there. The entity lunged at me. I tried to shield myself, covering my face with my arms, but I suddenly woke, heart racing, the alarm blaring in my ears. The room was slightly lit with the light from early dawn. But something was wrong. I sat up confused, still feeling the terror that the dream gave me. That creature or entity, whatever it was, felt so real. Then I noticed it. My window was open. I'd locked it the night before, I was sure of it, but there it was, slightly ajar. I froze. I couldn't explain it. My mind scrambled to make sense of it, but I couldn't. My heart pounded in my chest as I hurried to the window, closing it, locking it tight. But the feeling of being watched never left. The rest of the day passed into a haze. I couldn't shake the thought of the dream, the image of that dark thing chasing me. Something wasn't right. I tried to ignore it, for the time being, and continued with the rest of my day. But when I pulled into my driveway that evening, I saw a black cat. It darted across the yard fast, at an almost unnatural speed. It stopped and got out of the car. Thinking I'd check on it, I didn't want to be paranoid, but something felt off. I looked around and lo and behold, the cat was gone, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I went inside, still feeling very queasy about this whole situation, so I tried to distract myself with video games, and that certainly didn't help. The sense of dread gnawed at me. It felt as if I had a stalker who was just waiting, barely out of sight, watching. I went to bed early, hoping for rest. But as soon as I felt myself nearing slumber, I heard it again. The same noise I heard last night. The yowling. Distant, faint at first, then louder and closer. I wanted to ignore it. I wanted to believe it was just some stray cat who was in intense heat. But deep down I knew it was no ordinary cat. I fell asleep since I was quite tired, and the sound never ceased. Accepting that it was just a very loud, rambunctious feline, I decided I wouldn't pay it any mind. However, as if on cue, I felt a sense of dread unlike anything I felt before. I awoke, blinking rapidly to adjust my eyes in the darkness. I realized my body's paralyzed, like something was pressing down on me. I couldn't move. My body refused to obey, and panic rose in my chest as I struggled to move my limbs. Realizing, in the moment, that I was having an episode of sleep paralysis, I began reciting an incantation, a prayer that offers a protection against evil. I could only move my eyes, so I screamed the prayer in my mind, and while doing so, I was able to slightly turn and look over at my window. There it was, the cat, the damned black cat who caused all these problems, sitting on the windowsill, and the window was now open again. Its eyes glowed in the dark. Its yowling was a screeching now, practically screaming, but something was terribly wrong. I watched as its legs twisted, bent backwards. It looked so wrong. It was like its bones had been rearranged, contorting it into ways that no living being ever could. The sight of it made me feel sick to my stomach. I wanted to scream. I wanted to yell so badly, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then the cat did something impossible. It stood up on its two hind legs and smiled at me, while looking straight at me. My heart stopped and I was frozen. It moved closer, its twisted limbs jerking the unnatural movement, sending waves of terror through my body. Its body stretched, the fur dissolving into darkness. The form of the cat was now gone, replaced by a void of emptiness. And then I heard a ragged voice sounding like someone whispering. The words sounded strange and foreign, but somewhat recognizable, but a language I'd never heard before. This didn't matter. The sound its voice made my blood run cold. By this time I had finished reciting the prayer for protection and began regaining control of my limbs. Just as I was about to move without warning, the creature looked at me, its grin dissipating into anger. It let out an awful blood-curdling shriek and jumps out the window, looking at me one last time before its body, twisting in the night, disappears into the shadows. I lay there motionless, paralyzed. The terror clung to me like a second skin, and after what had happened, I couldn't sleep that night, nor the one after. Because when I closed my eyes, I felt that same presence. The strange cat never appeared again, and the yowling I never heard either. In the days that followed, things seemed to go back to normal. Every time I passed a reflective surface, I feared a shadow might flicker at the edge of my vision. The terror that I saw, that I heard, it stays with you. At night, I tried to go to sleep fast, in fear that I'll hear it again, the faintest and most chilling yowling in the distance. I hope none of you ever experience this. It's truly disturbing. I'll start by saying that I consider myself a healthy mix of skeptic and believer, someone truly on the fence. Without proof or evidence of something's existence, I default to skepticism. But I've experienced enough to know that the supernatural in general does exist, and I believe the things I have personally experienced. I approach religion the same way. I am agnostic, but also pagan. I cannot believe in a God without proof, but should that proof be provided, I would acknowledge that deities exist. Whether I would personally worship them is another matter, but that's largely because my worship has already been claimed. To me, skepticism and belief can go hand in hand. Skepticism tempers belief from going too far so that rational thought might help explain that belief. I can think of two experiences in particular that helped me fuel that belief, where there would otherwise only be skepticism. They're not the only supernatural occurrences I think I've experienced, but I've grown up in rural Minnesota long enough to know to keep my eyes away from the side of the road at night so that I don't risk getting that proof. I've also done my fair share of witchcraft and divination, and as I've said, I have my own forms of faith, but those to me stand different. On to my experiences. The first was in the middle of school during a class trip to Washington, D.C. We were on the lawn in front of the White House. If you know about the protester who had to stay permanently camped in front of the White House because she was grandfathered into the no unorganized protesting rule as long as she didn't leave her spot, it was that area. I don't know if she's still there, but it's the best context I can provide. I had to go to the restroom, so I went to a nearby park bathroom. As I approached, I noticed a woman sitting on a park bench across from the bathroom. At first, she just seemed like a homeless woman sitting and taking a rest. But something about her was off. She sat there staring directly at me, a glare of malice that genuinely sent a shiver down my spine. I felt uncomfortable around her, but at the time couldn't really understand what I felt, so I assumed it was social anxiety from being stared at. Then I noticed the bugs. I don't know if they were bees, wasps, or hornets, but they swarmed through the air and crawled all over her, landing on her skin. And the whole time she didn't react. I had a phobia of insects at the time, one I've been working to overcome. So once I noticed, terror and panic started to take over. I all but book it away. It was only afterwards, when my panic attack subsided, that it really set in, and I realized just how wrong it all was. I don't know what she was. Maybe she was just an old woman who needed to rest more than she cared about the swarm of stinging insects actively crawling on her skin. But I don't think she was human. The second incident was years later. I was driving delivery for a pizza place and it was late at night. I was the closing driver, so it was just me and the closing manager that night. I had been burning the midnight oil. I'd come in early for my shift and it was going late. It was after closing, but we still had a lot of deliveries before we could even start cleaning. And also, side note, I beg you, if you're ever thinking of ordering delivery half an hour before closing, don't. That single delivery might mean the difference between having to work an extra hour after closing. Needless to say, I was drained. As I was making a delivery along a back road, I saw something in my high beams. It looked like a dog or a wolf, dark and big. It looked at me, eyes shining in my headlights as it passed across the road. The road was on a wide turn that went around a big hill. After the black dog crossed, I expected it to go up the hill. I was keeping a careful eye on it because I've hit enough animals and I didn't want to hit another. It didn't go up the hill. It went into the hill. It was dark and I was tired. Could it have been a trick of my eyes? Maybe. But my brights were on, and it was right on it as it bounced off the road and into the bare hill. There were no trees for it to hide in until the top of the hill. I'm not always the most observant person, but animals on the road are a learned exception of that. I appreciate these stories have rational answers, but something within me tells me that they were far from rational, and there's something paranormal underlying here. What are your thoughts? Hey guys, it's Mort here, and I really hope you enjoyed tonight's paranormal video. If you did, it would mean a lot to hear your thoughts down below. I also would like to add an extra special thank you to my members and patrons whose names can be seen on screen. For signing up, they get some exclusive perks like the name on screen right now, exclusive videos, other cool content, birthday shout out and topic of your choice. There's a whole bunch of stuff, and it would certainly mean a lot if you could join their ranks for a small monthly donation, if you want. But that's it from me. I will be coming back tomorrow for funeral home stories. It's actually a really good video, and I know sometimes people are less inclined to watch topics which aren't super popular, but I hope you guys give it a chance, so YouTube doesn't tank the video straight away. Alright then guys, have a good one. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.